Hey friends, today I'm here to talk to you about pens, specifically the Uniball ink pens. So, as a disclaimer, this is what started it all. I found this Uniball Signo DX 0.38 in my stash. And this is what I started using in my traveler's notebook in January. And the reason that I loved it was because it's such a fine tip gel ink, but it's not scratchy. And if you are looking for a finer tip like a 0.38, but you can't stand that scratchy feeling on the paper, you're going to love Uniball. So you know that I use other brands in my Erin Condren planners, typically the 0.5 or 0.7, but there's just something about these Uniball ink pens that are different than the other brands on the market, as far as I have found. And let me tell you, I've tried a bunch of ink pens. So when I purchased this one, I loved it, but I wasn't loving that it was a capped version and was really looking for a retractable version. So I went ahead and found, let's see here, this one on Amazon. It's a Uniball Signo, but it's actually their 307, and it's in the 0.38. I actually wrote here on this paper with this ink pen, and this is the ink pen that I've been using that I am just absolutely loving. I hate to use the word obsessed, but I do really enjoy this specific ink pen. So then I decided, if I love these fine tip Uniballs so much, why not try out some of the other Uniball ink pens on the market? And that's where I went to Jet Pens and purchased a variety to kind of review with you. So I do have the colored versions of these Uniball Signo RTI pens, and I have several colors that I'm going to show you. I also have it in black. And then I have a bunch of black ink pens with different tip sizes. But what I wanted to do that would make this a little bit different than a regular pen testing, or maybe more in depth is a better word, is to write on a variety of papers, because let's be honest, the paper does affect the way the pen will write. It affects the way it feels, if it's gliding over the paper, if the paper's porous and really soaks up the gel ink. All of those things are important. So I didn't just want to grab a piece of paper and write with the ink pens. I wanted to do a variety. So here we have HP Premium 32-pound paper. This is what I used to use in my traveler's notebook to make inserts. It's very thick and luxurious. It's a great thick paper if you're making your own inserts. However, the thicker the paper, obviously, the more bulk you will have on your insert. So that's why I switched to the HP Bright White 24, which is 24-pound paper. And again, I got both of those on Amazon. The 24-pound paper is obviously a little bit cheaper than their premium brand. Of course, we have to do a pen testing in my Erin Condren notebook. This is typically where I do all of my pen testing, but again, I wanted to expand it out a little bit today. And then, surprisingly, the Day Designer paper is one of my favorites to write on with gel ink, so we'll be testing the ink pens out on the Day Designer paper as well. So we have 4 different types of paper, and we're just going to get started. We'll talk about each ink pen and then do a little bit of pen testing. Let's go ahead and jump in with the colored versions that I have here. These are all the Uniball Signo RTI ink pen in the 0.38. They are retractable, and actually I'll point out here that all of the Uniball ink pens are manufactured by the Mitsubishi Pencil Company, And for this specific set, I bought as a colored set on jet pens, and I will link that below for you. But we're just going to go ahead and get started with the pen testing. First up on this copy paper, and these do have a label for the colors, which I really appreciate. So this is the Uniball Signo RTI. And again, all in the 0.38. And this is the color red. So there it is on the premium paper. No smear here, dries very quickly. Again, a gel ink. Same thing here, no smear. Try this on the Erin Condren paper and on the Day Designer paper. Then we'll go through quickly. I won't tell you all the details because all of the pens are the same, and we will just write on all 4 paper sources. I'll fast forward you and I'll go through all of these colors. And before we move on now to the black ink pens, I did want to talk about how I personally felt these wrote on each of the paper sources. So this is the Erin Condren paper. You know this is very toothy. These were not my favorite ink pens for this paper. It did feel a little bit more scratchy. I think that's because of the texture of the Erin Condren paper. So my personal preference is typically a little bit of a thicker tip on the Erin Condren paper. And then I absolutely loved how these wrote on the Day Designer paper. There was no smearing, just a very smooth flow, no scratch at all, even for that 0.38 tip. And then in second place would be either of these premium HP papers, either the 32 pound or the 24 pound. They're a good general ink pen and did not feel scratchy on this paper, but definitely not as smooth as on the Day Designer paper. So that's the review of the Signo 0.38 RTI ink pens, the colored gel ink. Now let's talk about the Uniball black ink pens. So just as a reminder, this is the one that started it all for me and the Uniball obsession. This is the Uniball Signo DX in the 0.38, and I will write with it here on this 24 pound paper. A little bit of smearing there at the very end if I rub my finger across, but it does dry very quickly. Now let's move on down to the 32-pound paper. And I know some people prefer a ink pen with a cap. They don't like the retractable option. So if you are looking for a capped version, this would be one that I recommend. I'll also write on the Erin Condren paper. And again, this is a finer tip, so on the Erin Condren paper, it does feel just a little bit more scratchy. Better drying time though. And then we will do the Day Designer. And to me, this one writes very comparable to the colored versions that I just got done with. And then when I decided I loved this but wanted a retractable option, that's when I moved to this Uniball Signo and the 307. This again is a 0.38. I love that it's retractable, and then for me, the minimal look of the white barrel, and you can see here on the grip, you do have a nice cushioned grip, and it has some little bumps. Yeah, that's the technical term I'm going to use to give you a nice grip. So let's test this out on all of the paper sources. Now this next ink pen is exactly the same as this one that we started with here in the black. However, I noticed that Jet Pens offered a gray version. So this is the same, but with a different colored ink. So we will go ahead and just write kind of next to this one because it is the same ink pen, so that you can see the gray ink. And it's another thing I've been seeing a lot of people say that they prefer gray over black just because it's a neutral color but not quite as harsh on their paper. So I thought that was an excellent point, and I wanted to show you that option as well. This next version, I purchased one on Jet Pens, which came in this matte black with silver writing, and then I picked up the same ink pen at Walmart, but it has a gold writing on it. These are both labeled the Signo. Actually, now that I'm looking, there is a little bit of a difference, and I want to make sure that I tell you correctly. So this top one is the Signo 307, and this bottom one is the Micro 307. And let me just check the nib sizes. So the Micro is a 0.5 and the Signo is a 0.7. So let's test out the Micro first, Micro 307 with the 0.5. a little bit more smearing on that one than the others. Not as much on the other paper here. Then we will try the Erin Condren paper. And lastly, the Day Designer. And then obviously very similar to that one is the Signo 307, and this has a 0.7 tip. Again, a little bit of smearing. The next set I'm going to talk about, they are all the same. The Uniball Signo RTI, so the same as those colored inks that I showed you before. However, I did pick up the 0.28, 0.38, and 0.5. So we'll see how these nibs compare to each other, starting with the finest of 0.28. And I will tell you, this being a 0.28, this is definitely the finest tip that I have here to show you. And it writes the finest. You know, sometimes you pick up a pen and it says 0.5, but you think, oh, this really writes like a 0.7. This really seems true to size on the 0.28. And it is very scratchy on the Erin Condren paper, not so bad on the printer paper, and I'm assuming, yeah, even better on the Day Designer paper. Okay, and then we're gonna just go right in to the next size up, which is the 0.38, and I'll just draw a little line underneath. And then we'll bump up again to the 0.5. All of these, again, are retractable. And I feel like, again, writes true to size. And surprisingly, on this paper, I'm really enjoying this 0.5 out of those three the most. And I typically prefer a finer tip, but like I said, sometimes I have my own opinion about things and it changes. Yeah, I really like the 0.5 in that ink pen. Let's do two more here. So the 0.28, here's the 0.38 and the 0.5. Again, the 0.38 and the 0.5. And lastly, we are going to wrap up with the Uniball Signo UM153, I guess is what it's called. All of this is in a different language, so I can't really see other than that. So the UM153, not a retractable pen. This is a 1.0 millimeter tip, by far the thickest. And again, I usually prefer a thin tip. However, I wanted to show you guys a thick option in case you're looking for something really, something a little bit different. So this is the UM153. on the 24-pound paper. Lots of smearing. Again, the thicker the ink, the more time you're going to have to give it to dry. It's probably going to be worse on this paper because it's a little bit slicker. Yep. And then I'm going to guess, since I typically like a thicker pen on the Erin Condren paper, that I will like it best on this, and that is true, just because of the tooth of the paper. So less smearing by far on the Erin Condren paper, and then we will wrap up with the Day Designer. A little bit of smearing. So if you use this one, again, the Erin Condren paper is probably the best for these thicker types of ink pens. So that's going to wrap up the pen testing. I hope you enjoyed seeing it on 4 different paper sources, and I hope I showed everything in depth for you. I will have links to everything below in case one of the ink pens or maybe multiple ink pens really stood out to you and you wanted to give them a try. So all were really nice in the Day Designer. Definitely prefer some of the thicker ones like this 0.5 RTI in the Erin Condren paper. And then all of them wrote really nicely on both sets of copy paper. So you really can't go wrong there. And again, the thing that I think is just so different about these ink pens than some of the other brands is that you can get a finer tip, but not have that scratchy feeling. So I encourage you to give it a try, and I would love to hear what you think. Thank you guys for joining me, and I'll see you back next time.